bother. Uh, hey, good morning. My name is Michael. I'm going to attempt to speak about lessons learned trying to implement DevOps in a rapidly growing environment. Simple, really. Jenny already covered this a good bit, but Bill did ask me to speak a little bit about DevOps Days and why I was super excited about it and why I volunteered Natalie, our recruiter, Natalie, to help organize it. I volunteered Natalie because I'm not very good at organizing things. But I was super excited about DevOps Days in Vancouver for a pretty simple reason. It's one thing to go to California or New York, go to Velocity, go to DevOps Days afterwards, speak with Adrian Cockcroft, G. Quinn, Disorder, cool poster boys over the DevOps world, and be super, super duper excited. And then you fly back, and then you have to do your expenses, and then you have to really do your expenses, and then you have the hotel tickets to catch up on, and there's like almost a vacation, at least if you're as big a nerd as me, and then there's real world. And so I think having DevOps Days in Vancouver is really important because of local community. So I like to go to farmers markets to buy kale. And it's quite a tenuous connection, but you know, there's something quite satisfying about being able to buy something local, talk with the producer, talk with the people who've done it, and have something that's specific to the Pacific Northwest or wherever your farmers market is. And I guess that's why I think having DevOps Days in Vancouver is a pretty sweet thing, because it's one thing to go during your quiet period, talk with big people, talk about big things, but it's much cooler to be able to call events, go for lunch, go for a beer, and talk over a slightly more practical idea that might actually work in the real world. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to talk about the local community here. I guess the other thing is when I moved here 6 years ago, I work in video games, it's quite different to Flickr or Yahoo or Google or whoever else. And so I moved from Dublin, where there's a very active community. Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, other people have huge offices, and there's quite a vibrant local Linux users group. There's a lot of get-togethers, and when I first moved to Vancouver, all I could seem to find was game developer events, which I work in video games, but I'm very definitely not a game developer. My 3D math is appalling. So I'm looking forward to actually talking about web scale and other things with local people. And finally, thank you. My favorite part of this is definitely not the prepared talks. My favorite part is the unconference ad hoc breakout ignite sessions afterwards, because I'm just one guy standing up, being a bit of a jerk and saying I think this, and this, and I much prefer to talk with people and collaborate and generally I find other people are much smarter than I am. So I'm looking forward to the session this afternoon. So thank you in advance for your vibrant, enthusiastic, enlightening participation in the breakout sessions. Sorry. So I originally I'm very sorry. So I originally subtitled this talk "The Lament of a Failed DevOps Manager." I thought that might be a little bitter to open the presentation or open the session with, so I kind of dropped it, but I thought it's worth mentioning here. I already mentioned I'm not good at computers, so that's one excuse. And I guess the origin of this talk is talking with Vince and a colleague of mine after the first Puppet users group meetup in Vancouver, and we were all debating what we thought DevOps was and wasn't. And so I've tried to do this multiple different ways over the years, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've hopefully learned some things. So I'm going to basically try and cover some of the mistakes and some of the stuff we've learned. Also, I'm going way too quickly, so apologies. Finally, introductions. Hey, I'm Michael. I'm a principal systems architect, which is a very grand job title. I wasn't at the Polyglot event last night, but I believe Brian Cantrell had references to people with purple robes and grand titles and that sort of thing, and that very much applies to me. Prior to having a ridiculous job title, I have done a lot of other roles at Demonware. So I started as a tools engineer working on build automation and jam files and distributed builds and continuous integration. 8 years ago, over 8 years ago now. After that, I worked as the only sysadmin, then one of 2 sysadmins supporting multiple 24/7 launches. Then we were acquired. I ended up volunteering to be a manager because I thought it would be a good idea. And then realized that I did not like Excel, did not like PowerPoint, as is obvious. So it took a while, given we were acquired and growing rapidly, to actually step back from management. So I actually ended up accidentally as a director for a while, which is even worse than being a manager. Before switching to our technical track, and now I'm a principal engineer. The systems architect portion is essentially trying to think big picture, 30,000 feet view, paradigm shifts, long-term rubbish. But it's essentially trying to picture where I think we should push our systems to over the next 3 years. And the principal systems bit is because I guess I'm one of a couple of people who know where all the bodies are buried and know how our 70+ service stack actually fits together. So that's who I am. I'm also on Twitter at Ook. I don't put anything interesting there though. Oh, and the cool cartoon avatar is from when we were a startup and didn't have money for Christmas presents. So one of the only professional comic book artists in Ireland did a portrait for us because he was good friends with our CEO. So who are Demonware? So we do online services for video games. We're kind of, I guess, cloud. So if you have used iPhones and Game Center, we do something similar. We provide back-end APIs. So if any of you played video games, a lot of people, there's I guess, dedicated servers and there's back-end services. And they're quite easily confused in 16-year-old brains, especially when they're 16-year-olds with ADD who play too much Call of Duty. So we do the middleware. We do the back-end APIs. We don't do dedicated servers. We track presence, we track mail, we track QoS, we track a lot of the sort of the lower level stuff. We do pretty crazy bespoke stuff for Call of Duty. So a couple of years ago, there was a feature in Call of Duty where you could stream, every single game played was streamed up to a back-end service, and then you could download it and edit it, view it from any location, look at detailed stats on who killed who, where on the map. That all fed into a website which crunched the data, and when it was up and running, let you see on various second screen devices how your stats were doing and your kill-death ratio and organized clan stuff. That's the sort of stuff we do. If you get disconnected in the middle of a game, or if you get disconnected from a dedicated server, hopefully that isn't us unless we've really screwed up. So we're comparable to Xbox Live, Game Center. The other thing we do is help design new features like the theater mode in Call of Duty I just mentioned. And finally, we were an independent company. We were acquired by Activision Blizzard a couple of years ago. Unlike EA Horror Story, so a lot of you probably have friends in this town who work for EA, and there's a very standardized operating model for EA. And was it the local Vancouver author who had the book JPod? So we're not quite JPod. Activision have independent studio models. They let different studios do whatever they want as long as they actually ship the games. So we're a reasonably independent studio in Activision as long as we keep Call of Duty and Diablo and Skylanders work. So yeah, that's why there's only a small bit of Activision branding here, I guess, because we're not part of the big overlord in quite the same way your friends at EA were. Honestly, we're good people. Our recruiter is here somewhere as well. So some of you might think, well, no big deal games. I used to play Counter-Strike. Apologies. It turns out games are actually pretty popular. Until Grand Theft Auto 5, which launched a few months ago and was in the news a bunch. Call of Duty was the largest entertainment launch of all time. And those are old statistics pulled from our website, but they're pretty big. That's the 3.2 million concurrent online gamers is not like daily active users or some other metric. That is like persistent TCP connections to backend services. So people actively doing tasks against their services. So it's pretty big. We really do peak at over 300,000 requests per second. There is one thing I guess that's important to call out about these numbers. It's not actually like typical web API requests. So it's video games are they care very much about efficiency. So we have a packed binary protocol. So we can do some cheating to allow us to do 300,000 requests per second, being able to maintain a persistent TCP connection, being able to control the on-the-wire format, not having to worry about headers or JSON or anything like that. So that helps a little, but despite all that, we are pretty big. And so while we're big and awkward now, I want to try and explain some of the things I learned while we were growing rapidly. The fetching slide is or the fetching graph is a marketing graph, so there's no useful information on the y-axis. But the general point is that things go up and to the left. And that makes for a lot of challenges. So when I started in Vancouver. So we've grown a lot, people, scale, complexity, a lot of other things. But a good illustration is when we started in Vancouver 7 years ago, our now CTO was one engineer in a one-bedroom apartment in the West End. A year later, I moved over, so doubling headcount, and it was two of us in a one-bedroom apartment in the West End, which is a pretty sweet place to have an office. We're now about 100 people in downtown, just outside downtown Vancouver, near Main Street, SkyTrain Station and Science World. We're not quite as much fun to visit as Science World, but we do have beer and log cabins and all the usual silly toys. And so it's been a challenge dealing with that growth in headcount alone. But additionally, our services have gone from services which store a very small amount of data which is temporary, ephemeral, anonymous, to in-depth, deep data. I think a 30-day window of the stored streaming data for Call of Duty that lets you replay it from any point of view is at least a petabyte, unduplicated or uncompressed. So it's pretty big. We've gone from tens to thousands of servers. Unfortunately, much like the graph, I can't be more specific. We've gone from a handful of services, map traversal, matchmaking, basics, to, depending on how you count, approximately 70 unique backend services. So we've grown a lot. In addition to going from an office in Dublin and Vancouver, we now have an office in Shanghai. And in total, I think we're approaching 200 people. When we were acquired a couple of years ago, it was 13. I think. So we now have more admin staff than we had actual staff when we were acquired. So it's been a big growing exercise. I'm not going to talk any more about technical stuff. We're kind of closed and paranoid because of the games industry. I'd like us to open source more and take part more, hence our taking part here. But we do talk a little about our tech, and some much smarter people than I have spoken about it. Interestingly, Malcolm and Rory both started college with me. They both do technical talks, and they both have PhDs. I don't do technical talks, and I don't have a PhD. There might be something to learn there. Arrow, not space. So there's a lot on this slide. I'll be really quick. We started back in the good old days with golden images, shell scripts, whatever server was available from eBay or our managed hosting provider had in stock that the sales guy managed to sell us. Lots of overnighted orders from CDW going, saying, what can you send us a full rack of, please, as soon as possible. It was fun. I guess in hindsight, it's no ops. Almost everyone had root. Sometime, I don't know the exact date, in 2007, we had to remove access for developers. I'll go into that in a little more detail. Slowly we moved from bespoke, handcrafted, delicate, individual Ubuntu servers to standardized, repeatable builds with CentOS on bare metal. Started to package our stuff. We had a couple of engineers at the Velocity talk that Jenny spoke about. We used Puppet when it was 0.24 point something first in production. We moved to CentOS. We got some ops interns, which was great. We did some reorgs because that's what you do when you're growing as part of a big company, at least once a year, I believe. We actually had a DevOps team, which I tried to manage for just over a year. As part of that, and a pretty important milestone, we had an engineer who moved from dev to ops to focus on ops tooling and ops automation. I was quite proud of that. We moved to continuous deployment for Puppet to production quite early, and kind of as a reactionary thing, but it's what we still do, and it's a good thing, I promise, even though it terrifies most people I explain to. Lots and lots of other stuff. Another important thing there is that, two more important things here, sorry, are that we worked with a company called DTO Solutions, who are very involved in the DevOpsDays movement, to try and establish a sort of big picture, clear idea of what our toolchain and service delivery pipeline should look like. We started to build internal APIs rather than tooling and services. And so, yeah, the big wins were actually building internal APIs. Continuous deployment of Puppet to production is a really big deal for us. And the really big dumb things we did were restricting access to production, starting with production, trying to retrofit. We were like stereotypical bastard operators from hell. So, you know, no, you can't do that. Computer says no. Assholes, basically. I think probably typically for a lot of very big growing companies with a traditional ops and a traditional dev, DevOps started and was almost exclusively focused on ops. And so that was not a good thing. This one's actually intentionally left blank because I thought I would have time. So I picked the number 10 because it seemed good and I guess OCD. Some of these are much bigger than others, so I'll go through some more quickly than others, but here are 10 lessons I extracted from our growth and our history. First one, and it's surprisingly hard, is being able to clearly articulate what DevOps is. That book is a real book. It actually looks good. I've skimmed the table of contents. You should be warned that if you download it, then a nice lady or gentleman from Rational will call and try and sell you rational DevOps solutions. And it's hard to keep a straight face. But the book does actually look good. I haven't finished it yet. Just read the first couple of chapters. And when I say be able to clearly articulate what DevOps means, I guess it's across multiple different tiers or levels. So you need to know what it is for you. You need to know what it is for you every day, for you in a bigger picture. You need to know what it is for your organization, people you work with, your boss, your executive leadership, and you need to be able to explain it clearly, articulately, and concisely, kind of the opposite of what I'm doing this morning. So this is a good friend of mine, and he's a concise summary of DevOps, which is beardless sysadmins. May not be the most constructive, but that's at least concise. So for me, every day, you know, I'm one of those people who tries to automate all the things. I'll start to do something that should take 15 minutes and then go, actually, I did this yesterday, and then spend the rest of the day building a makefile and a vagrant image and a tool and everything to do it, and kind of lose track of what I was actually supposed to do today, because it's important to automate all the things. Big pictures, some stuff I ramble about because I'm a principal architect. Service delivery pipeline and organizational sympathy are what I worry about in the bigger picture. And then, you know, I have colleagues who call it bullshit and it's as bad as cloud. My current boss is a big proponent of Gene Kim's visible ops, and he likes to push for DevOps within ops. And so, you know, trying to lead by example. The teams I work with are kind of a bit more disgruntled, and they're like, we have to write Puppet, really? Do you guys realize how much it sucks? And The rest of the quotes are a bit made up, but I think the something Michael rambles about is quite accurate. The other huge mistake I made, I guess, is apart from not being able to actually clearly articulate what DevOps is not trusting our developers. We have some very, very smart developers at Demonware, and so I revoked their access to production. And I should explain why. It was a week before we were due to be acquired by Activision. We had a single staging environment, and we had to push a major release to it to ensure we were going to get acquired. And one of our exceptional developers decided to tidy up the sudoers file and removed the comment for the group modifier, so that no one actually had admin access on the server. So he helped. I had screwed up by ensuring that that was actually a problem. And I famously leaned over him, told him I would see him next Tuesday. I shall see you next Tuesday. And then spent 6 hours reading the box so that we could actually do the deploy. And that has been a big thorn in our side since then. So since then, in my journey to attempt to be a manager and to attempt to be a director, I've read a bunch of books. 2 of my favorites are Michael Alsop, Runs and Reposes, Managing Humans, and his first chapter is Don't Be a Prick. And it's something I have to remind myself of every day. And I suspect a lot of traditional ops people do. The other thing is, ops people are terrible, terrible, terrible customers for the developers. So everyone should work as a service, and you should clearly articulate what you need to run your service and what dependencies you have from other services and provide a good API. Ops people are terrible at actually opening bugs. They'll just grumble and complain and work around. They don't really provide requirements, just that's wrong, do it better. Can't really provide examples. Make it like Apache, go away, I'm busy. And a lot of them tend to go by like tradition and superstition. And well, the last time we did this, we had to uncouple the SCSI terminator and wave a rubber chicken anti-clockwise. And therefore, that's the way we still need to do it for all time. A really good book, which helps actually explain in developer-friendly terms what it takes to have a good operational friendly service is Release It by Michael Nygaard. Someone I saw speak at Velocity a few years ago, and read it and learn how to be a good advocate for and customer for your developers and trust them. I didn't for a long time, and it was done. And again, on a related note, start with development. So we've been working on automation for over 5 years in Ops and Demonware. But it has always been about production. It's always been about ensuring we're ready to ship Call of Duty because, you need to ship Call of Duty or whatever other big game we're working on. And our automation is until recently, when we were able to hire software engineers, automation written by ops guys. So it's never really usable in development. It sort of assumes that it's running on a machine with 32 gigs of RAM or a machine with access to an unautomated core DC service that is bespokely built in every DC. And it doesn't really work nice and easily in a segregated dev environment. So don't do this. If you're starting automation, if you're starting to work on workflows and deployment, start with development. It's really easy to get it to the point where a new developer or a new ops person starts, or a new DevOps person starts. They get their credentials on the first day, they sign into a portal, they push make going out, grab a coffee and come back, and whether it's running on their workstation using something like Boxen or Vagrant, or it's running in EC2, or it's running in a private cloud, they have a full running replica of your production environment with all dependencies, all services running off the latest production version. That is achievable. We're still working on it because we were a bit ass backwards, but we're getting there slowly. And if you actually start from development and then propagate through to production, it's much, much easier than trying to retrofit. So that was another lesson I learned the hard way. I'm really going to have to hurry up. Toolchains, not tools. We have a big word cloud somewhere. It mentions Erlang and Python and Hadoop and MySQL and lots of other technical things. When we had a DevOps team, they were the Puppet guys. We now have an Asias guy, a logging girl, graphite guy. I think that misses the point. I don't particularly care which configuration management service you use, what's important is you're using configuration management and it's repeatable and consistent and works in every environment you care about. I don't care what Apache or HTTP server you use. Focus on the components, focus on the services, focus on the business requirements. Leave VI versus Emacs to people who are not busy. So yeah, it's you know what is important is knowledge, not tradesmanship. So you should be able to think. So I have a BA in computer science. So this is my token nod to my BA, and it's because you know it's to be able to think about the impact of computers in society and to think about classical computer architectures and apply all that stuff to the real world. And you know, you learn. So I learned a lot of weird languages in my BA in computer science, but my lecturers assured me that it doesn't matter if I'm not learning the latest and greatest language. What's important is the knowledge and the ability to be able to abstract and apply it. And you should make sure and not fall into the trap of like tradesmanship over knowledge when you're thinking about your toolchain components. I'm really running out of time, so apologies. Service delivery pipelines. This is basically DTO Labs trying to put an agile spin on ITIL. And so this is part of our internal service delivery toolchain, and it's essentially going from ops and how ops and dev work together to go from build to production. It's a mixture of repeatable processes, workflows, and toolchain components, and it's you know it's kind of complex, but it's essentially about pushing everything in the correct direction. So you need to think about how to deliver the service you want to your customers if you're thinking about DevOps. Doesn't matter about Puppet or Chef. It matters that you're delivering service in a smooth pipeline with no barriers, no impediments. You're getting stuff to your customers. So I already mentioned this. Lots of other people have spoken about this at far greater length and in far more detail than me. So read up on it. So this is one of probably the only original idea in this presentation. I really shouldn't have left it so late. There's a fascinating blog by an English guy called Martin Thompson who specializes in high-frequency trading and low-latency services. And it's about a lot of things like cache coherency and JVM garbage collection and a lot of other things. But he built it because of a quote from a famous English racing driver, Jackie Stewart, and he's he's a famous Formula One driver, I believe, and he basically was of the belief that as a driver you couldn't really push things unless you understood the mechanics in detail of how the car worked. And this guy takes a similar approach to computing and high performance and low latency computing, and he modern CPUs with pipelining and multiple cores and hyper-threading are very, very different to at least what I learned about in computer architecture in the 90s. And it's important that you update your knowledge and understand closely how the machine works. And so I think, and it took a long time for me to realize, that if you're thinking about DevOps, it's important you think about your organization, what your goals are. So for Activision, it's pretty simple: ship big games and make a lot of money, and then continue. It's an honest business model for the most part. Then look at what tools, what technical components make sense given your business goals and whatever processes you need to comply with. And don't make the mistake, and the mistake I made and a lot of other people at Velocity in 2009 made, which is, going, well, Etsy did this or Facebook did this, let's copy and paste it. You need to understand your organization and how it is composed, and then think about automating it. You can't automate something unless everyone agrees how it actually has to happen, and until you have sign off. So, when thinking about DevOps, think about your organization, think about how it works, and think how you can be sympathetic to the goals and processes and culture of your organization. Don't just go, Etsy, do this, we should do it. It doesn't work, trust me. And this is where I get really pointy-haired and betray my roots as a manager, so I'll be quick. Organizational flexibility. So I am very aware this is directly contradicting what I just said. which has been sympathetic to your organization. But the picture on the right is, a bunch of famous org charts for big businesses, and some of them are pretty dysfunctional. I was quite surprised to find out that as part of a large organization, annual reorgs are entirely normal and expected and should happen. I don't think this necessarily is how things have to work. So Valve, just out of the border, have a very interesting model where every employee has a mobile desk and they organize into groups they want to work in. Brian Cantrell, who I missed last night, has either he or Brendan Gregg has a very interesting presentation they gave a few weeks ago, which has just turned up on YouTube, about questioning hierarchy, questioning leadership, and how to scale organizations based on engineering alone. I'm not sure most of us will ever reach that point where there is a flat hierarchy, but there are some really simple things you can do, and promote engineers working together. Google have something called mission control, where you spend 6 months as a SRE intern. I spent 6 months this year as an intern working on one of our internal ops APIs. It was fantastic. Don't make the mistake, and it's one we currently have, and I'm trying to get rectified, of having an ops floor and a dev floor. That will lead to a very rigid, awkward org, and you should question that. Communication is hard. I'm very obvious at that. Hiring matters. The single biggest difference I made as a manager was actually hiring good people and firing people when necessary. Because DevOps is so vague and so woolly, you'll need to work with your recruiters, work with your financial people, work with a lot of other business people to actually explain what the hell you're trying to do and why this person is not a good fit despite the buzzwords and skills matching, and why one pair of hands is not the same as any other pair of hands. And honestly, people are not interchangeable cogs in a large machine. Push hard and make sure you get the right people to help you, because this stuff is not easy. And metrics and data, we have lots of metrics. Most of them are about stupid things like CPU utilization. You need to think about having metrics that actually explain how your business works, and ensure you're working on the right things as one cohesive unit. So this is how I try and think of things. When questioning something, when trying to design something, when trying to figure out how we're going to do something new, whatever X is, I ask myself, how does it make it easier to deploy and run our services? And I think that wraps up most of my 10 rambling points pretty well. It's important to question why you're doing it and if it's for the benefit of the greater organization. That's my principal lesson on DevOps. That's an aside. Looking forward, because I'm an architect, I'm reading The Data Center as a Computer, and I care a lot about distributed configuration and would love to talk about that later. Summary. And ta-da, we're hiring, which is the main reason we're here. That's it. Sorry for the rush and the appalling technical difficulties. Has anyone got any questions?
You state continuous integration of Puppet to production. Is that just the Puppet Toolchain and the configs therein, or a larger piece of pushing code to production through continuous integration?
So it's... when I said we had continuous integration of Puppet to production, what did I mean? Essentially was the question. And was it a full continuous integration pipeline or just the Puppet stuff? Unfortunately for now, it's just the Puppet stuff. And I think it's the issue that Jenny and her company are trying to solve, which is, a lot of people use automation to build a system, and then I'll just stop Puppet for this evening while I fix this thing, and then I'll come back and fix it later, honest. And then that doesn't happen because of some other surprise. So we use continuous integration and deployment for Puppet to ensure that having a system fully automated and that no one has ever logged into and is fully managed by Puppet is our normal default state. There's still some work to do to put staging in that. And on the right are two of the best tools for ensuring that people do this properly, and those are our build bots. The top one is Ebola, And I can't remember what nasty disease the second one is, but if you... Common cold, okay. I thought it was something ruder. But you get horrific diseases if you break our build pipeline. Currently, it's mainly used for Puppet, but we're working on working closely with our build engineering team to do similar workflows for some of our other services, because we finally have business metrics now that we have real managers, and it's pretty obvious that about 30% of our day-to-day ops tasks are someone copying and pasting something from IM or an email into config because developers don't have production access. So we're working hard to fix that. As soon as I get them cleared, yes. I'd love to put them online right now, but I only finished them last night, so I need to get someone to double check them. As much as I can put online, I will be online, yeah. Cool. Sorry for going late, and over to Phil and whoever's next.